Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for Digital Transformation here at Cognizant. I want to thank you for joining us today. Now, as many of you know, this is part of the Mobile Expert Interview Series. So today I'm very excited to have as our guest a gentleman from Citrix. His name is Brian Dye. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Kevin, thanks for having me.
So Brian is the Group Vice President and General Manager of Mobile Platforms Group at Citrix. So Brian, why don't you fill us in? What does that mean and what does that include?
Oh, it means we're having all sorts of fun over here as usual, but more practically speaking, it means that I lead the product team for our enterprise mobility offering here at Citrix, which obviously we'll be talking a lot about today. And really, I spend my day trying to do two things. First, really understand what our customers are trying to do so we can make sure that we're building the right things for them. And then second, help the team really go deliver on that as best as we humanly can.
Very good. So as I started out our interview by saying this is part of the Mobile Expert Interview Series, so my first real question needs to be, what makes you a mobile expert, Brian?
I think it's a great question. I mean, this whole space is moving so fast. If someone really says they're an expert, I would treat that with a grain of salt, myself included. But we certainly try to get smart, and obviously I learned a lot from the team and from our customers. But you know, my background before joining Citrix helped quite a bit as well. I spent a fair chunk of time at Symantec, really understanding the security side of the world, and not very broadly speaking. And then from there, understanding two particular things. First, how mobile fits within the broader set of security challenges, and then second, understanding that especially from a security standpoint, it's not just the technology, it's also the end user and their behavior and what you need them to do successfully. Those two things really have to come together to make this whole effort successful.
You know, I think I see a lot of the use of the word workspaces on your site and in our discussion. So let's make sure we cover that in the course of our discussion here today as well, Brian.
Absolutely. I mean, the Citrix first pioneered the term workspaces. We talked a lot about it at our Synergy event just this past spring. And the idea for us is really understanding that how we work has changed. The work is no longer something you do in an office, right? You know, you're taking this call from your home, which is not unusual for a lot of us. Work is a thing you do no matter where you are. So the workspace is really about creating any app through any device to any person at any time over any network. And that's where you create a virtual workspace, a software-defined workspace that's with you and moves with you wherever you need to go.
Oh, that's very interesting. So I probably am most familiar with Citrix in the context of GoToMeetings, which I use regularly for doing public webinars. So talk to us about the full breadth of solutions that Citrix has. And I guess then the second question would be, what role does mobility play in that whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, Citrix does have a really broad portfolio focused on that software-defined workspace that we were just talking about, and it runs, you know, if you think about it, all the way from the content creation, right, the actual apps themselves. Is a great application. We use it about 60,000 times a month here at Citrix, so we're definitely consumers. We have our own mobile applications known as the Works applications. And then, you know, from the apps, you've got the delivery of those applications. We have a big networking and application-defined networking business. Most folks know the NetScaler product line from that group pretty well. And then you've got the actual application creation and delivery infrastructure. We do a lot on desktop and application virtualization with our Zen app and Zen desktop business. And also Zen Mobile, really from a mobile standpoint, is really an application delivery, secure application delivery vehicle as well. And then obviously GoToMeeting is one of the things that stretches across that as an app that we deliver.
Got it. So there must have been some time early 2012 or late 2011 where you guys said, okay, here's our current strategy. We need to add mobility to that. Am I right with that? And if you said that, why did you say that?
So absolutely. If you think about the strategy for the company, right, that software-defined workspace, any app, through any device, through any network, to any person, wherever they are, we definitely saw, even at that point, how aggressively mobile was taking on. And even though it was outpacing on the consumer side was outpacing the enterprise side pretty aggressively, we definitely saw that there was a lot of opportunity in the enterprise. So we started organically with a bunch of work on the application side. So we built out what we still sell today as far as application security, application wrapping, and our Works productivity suite, so our own secure and wrapped kind of mail, client, web browser, this type of thing. But we saw that that wasn't enough. We saw customers really need to have security at the application layer, but also at the device layer and at the data layer. So we made a couple of acquisitions to build out that portfolio, ZenPrize being one of them that added the device management, and then our ShareFile product from an enterprise sync and share standpoint. So when you take the organically developed application control, the device management, and the data control, those are really key components. And then, of course, we added in the NetScaler piece for networking as well.
Oh, very good. So I see when I'm doing research on you guys, you used two acronyms quite a bit there. EMM for Enterprise Mobility Management, and then MDM, which Mobile Device Management is what many of us recognize. Are there other acronyms that we should throw in there that describe the range of what you're covering?
I think those are the right ones to start off with. I think Enterprise Mobility Management, the EMM acronym that you're talking about, is definitely how most folks look at the market today. I'm sure we'll talk later about where we think the market's going to go, because I think it will continue to evolve. But really, MDM, the device management, and MAM, the application management, are really subsets of that EMM space. We also, frankly, look at another one, EFSS, Enterprise File Sync and Share, if I followed that acronym correctly, is a big component of it as well.
Is that content and document management? Is that what that is?
Exactly.
It's something else.
No, you've got it exactly right. It's really the ability to have that secure collaboration, that secure sync and share for your content. You know, this is something I'm taking advantage of today. Like I've put every single document I have with Citrix on our ShareFile servers, and as a result, no matter where I am, I've got access to every single piece of my professional content. It's really nice, just from a personal standpoint, to be at my kid's soccer game over the weekend, have somebody write me and ask for a presentation, and be able to send it to them immediately without having to say, oh, I'll get that back to you when I get to my computer. Little things like that really help.
Yeah, so Brian, in the year 2000, kind of the right in the middle, or I guess probably close to the end of the .com era, that's what got me into mobility. I was selling a solution called Mobile Orchestrator for doing exactly that: file sync and save and store on laptops, because that was our focus at the time. So I was out preaching the gospel of mobility at various large conferences. But we were way before our time. Nobody knew what we were talking about.
Yeah, market education and market timing are critical. But like you said, that's why you're the expert as well.
So let's talk about the role that mobile and mobile security needs to play today. How important is mobile security to an enterprise's overall strategy?
I'm finding it's really critically important. It's typically one of the top 5 initiatives that we're seeing in most customers we talk to, and I think most of the analyst research really backs that up. I think what's really interesting is that it's coming from two aspects, and by the way, I think it's about to be coming from a third. The first aspect is end user demand. Right? If you work at a company that doesn't let you have email on your iPhone or your Android device or your Windows phone, then you're probably griping about it on a regular basis. So the end users are really forcing IT to go do this. And then from IT's perspective, they know that simply opening the floodgates and letting the content out through this aggregation point is not okay. So they know they need to deliver the security both for the business applications and for the data itself that their own internal policies and risk management need. And those, I think most folks are pretty familiar with those two vectors. What I'm starting to see as a third one show up is the first two, from an IT perspective, are things you have to do. Right? You're not actually adding ROI to the business, though. You're keeping your employees happy, but you're not creating net new value. We're starting to see folks really move to a third angle, which is, okay, I've got secure mobility, I've got my email, I've got my end users happy, but now wait a minute, I'm not in the business of helping my users do email. I'm in the business of driving what matters for our company. And what are the new apps that I can put on a mobile device that could automate business workflows that we never could before because we didn't have that secure presence out in the field, out with a knowledge worker. So that's the third aspect we see starting to pop up as well.
So is there a name for that? What do you call that?
You know, we're back to your acronym soup. Some folks are starting to think of that as the enterprise mobility platform, right? Where you're really gone from the device and the data and the network security, which is the starting point, to the core set of productivity applications, and then really moving towards custom or line of business based business applications that are automating workflows you couldn't before. And that's the evolution, if you will, from kind of original MDM, where it was years ago, to EMM, the enterprise mobility management, where it is now. Future moving towards EMP, this enterprise mobility platform. We'll see if the acronym sticks.
You know, it makes perfect sense to me because I've been writing for probably 6 or 7 years now about what I saw as kind of a gap in the mobile solutions area, which was mobile workflows, kind of what I was calling it. Because if you look at the ERP world, right, everything is so well defined internally on how things should, how you invoice, how you enter a sale, how you, ask for additional materials and supplies for a manufacturing plant and production. All that's very well defined. But what happens when they leave the confines of the building and their cubicles and they're driving out, meeting customers, doing external project work? That starts untethering those workers, yet there's still equally the same need for processes. So extending processes beyond the four walls and beyond the ERP into a dynamic world that's not so predictable is, I think, a really interesting area.
It's a super interesting area, and you really hit on something with this workflow that we've seen as well, and kind of two quick anecdotes on it. The first is a lot of folks are starting to get smart to this from a customer standpoint. So we used to see just the IT folks, the end user compute team, and the security team show up to evaluate purchases in the mobile space. We're now starting to see actually user experience folks that are looking at that workflow from an end user standpoint, and we're starting to see the development team show up as influencers and part of the evaluation process as well, which is related to that mobility and that workflow. The other piece that we're seeing that's really interesting is something that a lot of times we take for granted, because we've all been trained in the desktop world. In the desktop world, workflows that cut across apps are very easy, right? The operating system has made this very straightforward for us. But in the mobile world, the containerization and the security that you put around each of the individual apps tends to actually get in the way of that fluidity and that flexibility of workflow. So when folks are looking at solutions and they start to map out the actual tasks that each of us are doing, they're seeing really big differences between the vendors. It's something that we put a lot of effort into with a very big kind of product design group that really focuses on mapping out the individual workflows. But it's something that customers are really getting smart about, is recognizing that you can't have your security break the user experience. It's got to be both. Doing either one of them on their own, that's easy. It's bringing the two together, that's where the magic happens.
Got it. So let's talk about vulnerabilities and just the need for mobile security. When you're out there talking, I'm sure you're talking to clients and prospects continually. What are some of the biggest security risks that are real, that are out there today, that companies need to be paying attention to?
The two biggest ones that I would put my mind around are, number one is the user behavior, right? Having spent a lot of time in security, so there's some great quotes I'm sure people can relate to. Things like, the weakest part of my network is the carbon-based part, right? That would be all of us. Another favorite is, you can't patch stupid. That one's definitely out there among security professionals. And the reason that folks have these quotes is that you still see people today saying, look, I'm not willing to work with what IT has given me, so I'm going to work around it. I'm going to send docs to my Gmail account or whatever it is. So the biggest vulnerability continues to be each of us as carbon-based life forms and getting our behavior right. And when I think about that, it actually ties directly back to your point on workflows, that unless you nail a great end user experience that's as good or better than native, that's seamless, that lets you do what you need to do, people aren't going to use it, and you're putting in a bunch of good technical security controls that people are going to find ways to work around. So that's absolutely problem number one. And if you look within the landscape itself, kind of where that becomes an issue, aside from data leaving the organization, and data loss continues to be a big issue, the other problem is that you open yourself up to a particular stage of the attack sequence, which is the social engineering. Right, the mobile operating system does a lot to limit what you can do there, especially once you add containerization and device management on top of it. We can do a great job of securing that experience. But what we're seeing a lot of the attackers do is to try and use the mobile device as a way to engineer and learn about you. So even if they just get access to all of your contacts, for example, that is a really key step in the social engineering process that they're going to use to construct a much bigger attack against an organization. And again, end users have a really poor ability to assess their own risk there. So we've got to help save them from what they don't know is actually happening.
No, absolutely. Especially if you get an email from a friend, you're much more likely to open up the zip file that's attached.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've all seen examples of this. When you think about kind of spearfishing as one great example, one of the hazards too is the more senior you get in an organization, often the more vulnerable you are, because you spend less time in each email. You'll tend to click faster and think a little bit less, just because you're not getting 40 or 50 emails a day. You're getting 200 or 300 emails a day. So it's the end user is a critical person to train.
So talk to me about, within the Citrix ecosystem there, what are all the kind of various components that you're putting into this mobile platform?
Yeah, so for us, the mobile platform has a couple of key components, right? You've got the device and the core device management, right? A lot of folks call that MDM. That continues to be important. You've got the data security, that sync and share, that's critical. The network, the connectivity, single sign-on, micro VPNs, things like that. And then you've got the applications, both the productivity apps and the ability to containerize custom line of business apps. We really see those four things being absolutely critical to the right solution.
Got it. So where does like the idea or the notion of an enterprise app store fit in your world?
You know, the enterprise app store is part of that app stack because it's really how you deliver the various apps in, because the administrators want to enable and get control over what their end user population can consume. So that app stack for us is absolutely in the middle of that fourth apps tier.
Very good. So talk to me about what changes you guys have witnessed over the past 24 months, because things are changing so rapidly, and you might have had vulnerabilities or everybody needed to be educated on one topic 2 years ago, but now they get it, and so you've moved on to a new focus. But how have you seen the market change here over the last 24 months?
You know, Kevin, you just nailed it. It is really, there is such a learning process going on every side of this, right? The analysts, the vendors, the integrators, and of course the customers themselves. And that's really driving a couple of key things. First, we're seeing the types of purchases customers are making change dramatically. So if you go 24 months ago, I would say we're seeing 20% kind of enterprise or full suite sales and 80% just on the core device management. If you look in the last 6 months, that ratio is completely flipped. We're now seeing 80% enterprise sales, where folks are recognizing that just securing the device is not enough. You need the device, the data, the apps to really make the right plan for the organization. So 80% enterprise edition sales, that's kind of one big aha. The second big aha I touched on earlier, where the folks that are showing up to actually make the purchase and be influencers in the purchase are very different. It used to be just end user compute and the security teams. We're now seeing the user experience folks and the app dev team show up. And it kind of makes sense, right? If you think about this from an IT project standpoint, you're rolling out a big mobility project. One of your success criteria is probably going to be end user sat. So you probably need someone looking at that end user sat perspective as you go through the eval process. That's the second big one. And the third big one that's been really interesting to watch is kind of cloud uptake, because I continue to see it just be bipolar. I see some customers that are huge fans of the cloud service. They love what we're doing from a Zen Mobile Cloud standpoint, and the fact that we've got ShareFile in the cloud, and they want to go in that mode because they love not having to have the infrastructure and everything else that goes with the cloud service. I see a bunch of other ones in either particular geographies or particularly regulated industries that still look at cloud as, I'm sorry, I thought we were having a security conversation. Why did you just say the cloud word? Right. So it's really a bipolar uptick, and I'm really happy that we've got strong offerings on both sides of that, because we're able to help customers on both sides.
So let's peel back some layers here on that topic of cloud computing. How does cloud computing change what you guys need to do from a mobile security perspective? When it was all on premise, it was like you connecting to a back-end server in somebody's private data center, but now it's in the cloud. So how have you had to change your thinking and architecture to address those needs?
The great thing is, from the end user's perspective, right, not the IT organization, but the end user that they're serving, it doesn't change a thing. They've still got a mobile device, they've got a set of apps, they've got a set of websites they want to get access to, et cetera, et cetera. For them, it's completely independent of whether there's a cloud service or not. So that focus on...
They don't know where they're connecting. It doesn't matter to them.
Yeah, they don't know, and they shouldn't care, right? This is not what the end user needs to worry about, right? Just make the magic happen, guys. So we continue to focus on that piece. That hasn't changed. That focus on workflow that we talked about and user experience and the core apps portfolio hasn't changed a bit. On the IT side, there's definitely a big difference there, because essentially the focus on cloud, and we use the same software package whether it's on-premise or in cloud, has really made sure that we are continuing to push ourselves on scope, scale, and complexity of the type of environment that we can manage, and putting in the automation tools. We really see a great virtuous cycle between the automation and the education that we get running our software in the cloud, and how we learn to administer, monitor, drive uptime, everything else around that, and the improvements we drive back into the core on-premise software. Because if you choose to get Zen Mobile on-premise, you still have to drive monitoring and automation and everything else, so it's as cost effective as you humanly can. So we really see a virtuous loop going between those two because we use the same software package on both sides.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So a question that I've been pondering this weekend, Brian, is, it's every week we're reading about another big hack job of JP Morgan or Target or Home Depot and on with all these different security lapses. Is mobile more or less secure than other ways of even doing mobile payments and transactions? Is mobile part of an answer or is it part of the problem?
I think mobile is mobile without security is part of the problem. Mobile with security is part of the answer. Would be my simple response. I really feel like the great thing about mobile is it's a very different paradigm than security, right? If you think about how security changed when you went from a desktop to a laptop, it changed very little, right? You had to account for being offline and things like that, but it wasn't materially different. If you think about security as it goes from a laptop to a mobile device, it's fundamentally different because what the operating system expects is different, what the operating systems are providing is very different, and as a result, you can achieve a far better level of security on a mobile device with the proper follow-on instrumentation and controls and micro VPNs and things like that than you could in a traditional desktop environment. So I really feel like it's part of the solution, not part of the problem. The really interesting thing, though, too, is as we think about, it's not just about the device and the data, but those applications. And as customers get onto the real net new custom apps that they're rolling out, we're seeing a much tighter relationship between the app dev teams and the ops teams that are rolling out those apps, and that's going to get you better security as well because the folks that are writing the apps understand inherently that you're going into a mobile world, and that mobile world needs security inherent in the app and inherent in the delivery infrastructure, right? Zen Mobile in this case, to really be successful.
Got it. So the last couple of questions I'm going to ask you here, Brian, before letting you go here, is do you drink coffee at Starbucks?
I believe it or not, I have not picked up the coffee habit. It does mean I'm trying to shake a mean diet soda habit because I think coffee's better for you, but I'm not a coffee drinker.
Got it. So do you do any transactions via mobile devices?
Do I do transactions via mobile devices? I generally, if you think about shopping as a transaction, absolutely, right? I'll shop from my mobile device. Yeah. I generally try to make sure I'm doing that from within WorksWeb, right? Because that's just a much more secure way of doing it. But okay. That's from the longtime security guy that also has his home hard drive encrypted and all this type of stuff as well. So.
Oh my! So let's pursue the last question in the direction of your home. How many wireless devices would you guess you have in your own home?
Oh, number of wireless devices. That's great. Give me a minute. We've got a couple of iPads. We've got a couple of phones. We've got the television. Got the DVR player. Got a couple of. I would say probably 8 right now.
Very good. Can you remember the day when it was 1?
I can't remember the day when it was 1. And you know what? Now that you've asked that question, I started to think like, oh, wait a minute. Just my running GPS watch is actually Bluetooth enabled. That's technically wireless as well. So I bet you the number is actually more than.
Yes, and if we expand that to Bluetooth as well as part of the wireless environment.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely a communication protocol. When you think about it, the moment it's on the network, it's wireless as far as security is concerned.
It's too funny. I can't tell you how many times my wife drives off with my phone call because she gets in the car and drives out of the garage and automatically connects to my phone. And yes. She leaves with my phone call.
Yes. I think that's a feature request into the car manufacturers, kind of smart call swapping. That's a good one.
There you go. So now I'm going to slip in one more question here on the area of Internet of Things. Is that something you guys are covering, or is that something you're just looking at still?
Internet of Things is very interesting for us. I feel like the IoT market, if you will, kind of 2 comments on this. One, I feel like the IoT market is going to be a lot like the SaaS market. It's not really a market, right? I mean, there's a set of the SaaS market that if you're selling into it as a supplier actually is a market, but then after that it becomes a technology delivery vehicle to a bunch of other markets, right? Whether you're ServiceNow or Salesforce or whatever it is, right? So that's one perspective on it. So from an IoT standpoint, for us at Citrix, we're looking at it in kind of 3 areas. There's a set of things that we as end users are going to interact with, and where we're interacting with it, whether it's glass or watches or phones and where that whole market's going to go. That is super relevant to us. I think it's absolutely in the core of enterprise mobility, especially as businesses think about what can I do, what can I help my employees do with these devices that they couldn't before, especially getting out of just kind of eliminating pain and getting into generating business value. So that's a big element of it. More broadly at Citrix, we also have some work looking at what are the markets beyond that, beyond the kind of traditional kind of end user visible pieces that are going to be really relevant. And there's probably big chunks of the IoT market, right, like industrial controls and things like that, that I think are going to become part of vertically integrated systems that are provided by the various controls manufacturers. And as a result, I don't think we're going to have a big kind of focus or big engagement there. But yeah, it's definitely a market that we're very heavily invested in. I think some of it will fall directly into the Zen Mobile wheelhouse, and a bigger chunk will get covered by the broader Citrix as well.
Very good. Brian, I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your wisdom, and your insights with all of us today.
Hey, Kevin, it's been a ton of fun. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thank you.